When you think of redemption, what comes to mind? Is it a character, a regret, a promise, a person? Or is it a game? A game that, like many before it, has disappointed, lied, and taken advantage of you. But in time, and through a team that put the work in, managed to earn your trust back and deliver the product you wanted, the one you paid for, the game you deserved. AAA gaming has no shortage of disastrous launches, victims of corporate greed, top-down mismanagement, overpromising and under-delivering. But in this chasm of dissatisfaction, there does lie the few that manage to climb out, the ones that rise above, those that don't even bother to try. No Man's Sky, Fallout 76, Battlefront 2, and most of all, Cyberpunk 2077. December 10th, 2020. A global pandemic wreaks havoc across the globe at the end of a year already packed with games ranging from generation-defining, to divisive, to less than desirable. Gamers scoured the internet, raiding every GameStop in sight in hopes of finding a 9th-generation console. It was a time of uncertainty, panic, and futility. The demand for gaming has never been so high, and yet, there's never been such little hope. But there was one thing that we knew we could count on. CD Projekt Red spent the last 7 years developing the game of the generation, and it was finally here. Cyberpunk 2077, an open-world RPG set in the criminally underrepresented cyberpunk setting. Since this game's announcement, the hype could not stop building. Trailer after trailer, reveal after reveal, Keanu fucking Reeves. Who doesn't love Keanu fucking Reeves?
You're breathtaking!
In the years leading up to launch, expectations were through the roof. Dozens of deep dives, showcases, interviews, hard confirmations, and promises delivered by CD Projekt themselves showcased everything this game was set to be. And it was amazing. An open world sandbox, a story driven by choices that affects the world around you, branching narrative paths with strong RPG elements and non-linear quest design. Night City was going to be a sandbox where you could push the cyberpunk fantasy to its limits, a GTA-style wanted system that changes between regions with corrupt police and dynamic encounters, revolutionary AI where NPCs have daily routines, a dynamic weather system, an insanely detailed level of customization. What wasn't in this game? Hours worth of gameplay showcased the many mechanics that realized everything you could want from a cyberpunk game. And there wasn't any reason to doubt anything that CDPR was saying. After all, this was the company that just delivered The Witcher 3. The Witcher 3, one of the greatest single-player RPGs of all time. It was unfathomable to doubt CDPR, uncanny to think that everything they were showing and saying was anything less than the truth. And when launch day came around, well, you all know what happened.
This game is fucking broken.
This game was a complete disaster, especially on last-gen consoles. Whatever happened to releasing it when it's ready?
This game should have been delayed again. Should have been delayed until probably March of next year.
Borderline unplayable on PlayStation 4, just consoles in general. It barely gets above 20 FPS.
A fucking 2!
I and the entire leadership team are deeply sorry for this, and this video is me publicly owning up to that.
This wasn't just a disappointment. This wasn't just an outrage. This was a betrayal. It's not often a company goes from the incredible heights and untouchable reputation of the team that made The Witcher 3 to falling so fucking far. Everyone was mad when EA put monetized loot boxes in Battlefront 2, but no one was surprised it's EA. Everyone was disappointed when BioWare and Bethesda failed to enter the live service market, but they make single-player games and were clearly out of their element. But Cyberpunk. This was a single-player RPG delivered by a studio known for single-player RPGs, and one of the best in the genre no less. So for those of you that somehow don't know, let's briefly recap what happened. Well, for starters, the game wasn't finished. That was a fucking lie. This game had more bugs than bug snacks and was an unoptimized, glitchy, outrageous experience that was straight up unplayable on last-gen consoles, and it wasn't much better on current-gen and PC. It was so bad, the game was pulled from the PlayStation Store and didn't return for 6 fucking months. Do you know how bad shit has to be for that to happen? And the worst part of it all were the lengths that were taken to cover it up. Game journalists and content creators were only given PC codes, the platform with the best performance, and were only allowed to show footage that CDPR themselves provided. Some creators rightfully called out this tomfoolery, while others, mainly games media outlets, proceeded to publish glowing reviews, claiming Cyberpunk to be the game we all expected. But either way, the damage was done. The deception succeeded, and most didn't know how broken the game really was until it was downloaded to their consoles. CD Projekt Red, to no one's surprise, quickly began drowning in lawsuits. It was unforgivable to release a game in this state, but Cyberpunk's broken promises stemmed much further than merely being a playable experience. The game was fundamentally and mechanically filled with broken promises and flawed design choices. Cyberpunk was not the choice-driven RPG set in a dynamic sandbox that it was said to be. The amount of impactful choices and missions with non-linear quest design accounted for about 5% of the whole game. RPG elements were about as significant as my left nut after taking an ice bath, with skill trees that were convoluted, uninteresting, and used in a world that doesn't at all react to your choices. The wanted system was pitiful at best. I don't need to tell you how revolutionary the game's AI ended up being, and the dozens of mechanics and features that were both shown and promised were simply absent. Games change over the course of development, that's just how it is. But when a game's core identity ends up being fundamentally different from what was promised, marketed, and fucking showcased, when only the bare minimum to merely associate with that identity appears to be present, and when none of it even fucking works to begin with, that is a betrayal, a deception, and a fucking disappointment. By the time the dust settled, Cyberpunk 2077 was a commercial, financial, and economic failure. It was the butt of all jokes, the laughingstock of AAA gaming, and for a while, that remained the case. But CD Projekt Red didn't give up. They didn't throw in the towel and call it a year. Instead, they got to work. 7 months and 12 patches entirely dedicated to fixing bugs later, the game was still far from saved, but was stable enough to where they could start tackling the gameplay-focused problems. Patch 1.3 in August of 2021 improved the game's driving, balance, and gameplay, and over the next 2 years, new items, weapons, customization options, and quality of life improvements would be added one patch at a time, with bugs getting squashed at every step of the way. And 3 years later, on September 9th, 2023, Cyberpunk 2077 was reborn. Patch 2.0 overhauled the game's core systems. Perks and cyberware were significantly retooled. Vehicle combat and a revamped police system was introduced, and weapons, clothing, and armor were overhauled. Foundational reworks of the game's core problems brought Cyberpunk closer to its original vision. And with the majority of the game's technical issues resolved, Cyberpunk 2077 was finally in the state it should have launched in. And with Patch 2.0 came the first and final DLC. Phantom Liberty, an expansion that was critically acclaimed by everyone who touched it. The news of the game's successful relaunch spread like a wildfire. The reception to Patch 2.0 was overwhelmingly positive. The expansion was a commercial success. And finally, after 3 long years, Cyberpunk 2077 was redeemed in the eyes of its players. Today, Cyberpunk is a phenomenal game. From start to finish, you're glued to its masterfully written characters. Its setting is enthralling, and the immersive layers of gameplay keep you hooked for hours on end. It's an emotional roller coaster that grounds you in the magnetic dystopia that is Night City. And today, I'm here to tell you all about it. How this game suffocates you with its atmosphere, grounds you in its storytelling, how its world redefines the stylistic bounds of the medium, and how today, it might just be one of the greatest action games ever made. However, I'm also here to tell you that despite Cyberpunk's esteemed status, despite the long road it's taken to get to this point, it's still trapped by the dichotomy of its identity, a product forever split between that original vision and the mold it now finds itself thriving in. This is not the game that was promised, and even though I wholeheartedly recommend that you play it if you haven't, it still has room to grow. This video isn't a comparison going over everything that's changed since launch. What it is a deep dive into what Cyberpunk is today, what it isn't, and how, despite it all, Cyberpunk 2077 is absolutely redeemed. Night City, the city of dreams, where legends are born. The beating heart of this game, where graphical fidelity meets outstanding art direction, and a setting like no other. On this guided tour, you will see sights both breathtaking and pessimistically horrifying. On your left, the discarded corpses of everyone who didn't hit the like button, and on your right, a living, breathing beacon of opportunity. It's not an exaggeration to say that Night City is one of the most impressively crafted game worlds that I've ever seen. It achieves with flying colors what any game of this genre sets out to: immersion. But the sheer scale, quality, and production value that's on display has unequivocally raised the bar for what's technically and stylistically possible. A chaotic collision of neon futurism, corporate sterility, and gritty urban decay, CD Projekt Red built Night City to feel alive, oppressive, and seductive all at once. A stylistic mega metropolis where skyscrapers that pierce the sky are as intricate as the labyrinth of alleyways that twists below, where ray trace reflections, ambient lighting, and collective dynamism have never come together to look this damn good. And the scale at which it's implemented melts my brain whenever I think about it. The city at night is beautifully lit by the chaotic tapestry of neon. The stunning realism of the reflections is breathtaking and looks especially good when it's raining. No matter where you are in the city, there's a present disdain for the static. Whether it's the dynamic weather, the smokestacks rising out of buildings, or steam spewing out of sewer grates, the sheer density of NPCs breathes so much life into every road, building, and alleyway. Night City is the modern benchmark of what this generation's hardware can achieve. It's the game you see at every next-gen tech demo for a reason, and its art direction and setting do the rest. The dystopian, cyberpunk future of the retro 80s. In Night City, technology has evolved, but humanity has descended. Chaos and corruption seep into every class of society. Transhumanism breeds transformatism. This is a place where cybernetic implants are a cultural norm, where modding your body like a car can be as dangerous as getting hooked on heroin, where edgy drip matters most and a cyber samurai makes just as much sense as some guy in a mech suit. Night City in many ways is its own character. Like Gotham to Batman, it's defined by its collection of unique characteristics. It's not a place you go to. It's a place you're drawn towards, a land of opportunity where the pursuit of capitalism has elevated social classism to its peak, and every ounce of that idea is on illuminating display throughout the city. From the city's center, where sleek glass towers and sterile plazas project corporate dominance, to the run-down industrial buildings and neighborhoods of Watson acting as its contrast. The bustling markets and Yakuza influence of Westbrook are a neon reminder that crime pays here, and Pacifica, a failed corporate resort filled with abandoned malls and hollow shells of luxury, has since become a war zone overrun by gangs and hyperbolizes the violence and corruption that runs rampant on these streets. Every location throughout the game feels distinct, tells a story, but is harmonized through the bleak picture that's painted of what it's like to actually live here. Because this place fucking sucks. As corporate skyscrapers cast their shadow across the entire map, it's not long before you realize you'll never reach those heights. You will never stand atop a skyscraper and view the city from above. You're stuck on the ground, where this city burns your decency for the chance to climb out on top. It's the perfect visual paradox. An urban jungle so vast and interconnected you find it hard to look away from. The magnetic pursuit of a height so few are able to reach. It's a social divide that's at the core of Cyberpunk's central themes. And you feel it. This is a city that will stomp right over you, treat you like an ant on the sidewalk, the grime on its shoes, where international corporations tower over the masses from their shiny offices and flying transports, but are just as vile and corrupt as the gangs that steal and kill on the street. This is a world where limos and flying cars coexist with broken down vending machines and graffiti-written slums, where only the wealthy can afford the equivalent of an ambulance, where police won't respond to a dead body in your apartment for days because they just don't care enough to bother. It's, if I'm being honest, a fucking awful place to live, and yet so many are drawn to it regardless. A setting that intrigues, a world that's contextualized with rich stylistic liberties, thematic through lines, and a talented studio to make it all look drop-dead fucking gorgeous. That's the recipe for a game world that's not just impressive, but iconic. Memorable in the sense that it unmistakably immerses you. This city makes you feel small, grounded, or its first-person perspective that this game never breaks from, makes for unprecedented levels of scale around you. From afar, you see the extravagant beacon that so many are drawn towards. But the closer you look, the more the incredible detail and realism that seeps its way into the very fabric of Cyberpunk's world reels this city's ugly head. Whether it's the miasma of erotic advertisements and corporate propaganda that's littered fucking everywhere, reflecting what it's like to browse the internet without an ad blocker. The talk shows, news reports, and radio broadcasts you see and hear throughout that build a semblance of reality outside V's narrow view. The dozens of vendors and NPCs you can interact with that preach, scream, rant, and range from selling important gameplay upgrades to $5 mixtapes and more sex toys than you'd find in P. Diddy's basement. The phishing scams that get emailed to your inbox, the dozens and dozens of radio stations that you can listen to, and the hundreds of fleshed out digital scrolls that add context to the environment and the world as a whole. This is a dystopian, hyper-commercialized future that does an excellent job of making you feel like one insignificant part of it all. Night City is alive, its atmosphere is suffocating, and the last piece of the puzzle that brings it all home is the music. It's bombastic when it needs to be, tense when it has to be. The electric, metal-infused, punk-tempoed symphony is futuristic, but still feels like a 90s grunge punk soundscape most of the time. Every single one of Samurai's singles is permanently downloaded to my video game playlist for nerds that I don't tell anyone about, because Cyberpunk's OST knocks it out of the fucking park. In a broad sense, the setting that's brought to life in Night City is captivating, and I can't get enough of it. All things considered, as an open world, Night City is one of the best I've ever seen. But there's another side to this coin, because as a sandbox to live in the cyberpunk fantasy, it becomes a glass half full. Up until this point, I've talked about the things you're surrounded by, but not necessarily the things you can interact with in Night City. Fidelity, art direction, music, setting, and detail. The sum of these parts make up the canvas meant to contextualize and immerse you into the core gameplay loop. And that's vital. It's all you need for a good action game, and here, it's exceptional. It sells you on the world and setting, presents a production value unmatched in AAA gaming, and most importantly, it immerses you. But Night City as a sandbox? Well, that's a different story entirely. First, what is a sandbox? Within the context of this game, it's freedom. The freedom to live in the fantasy that Cyberpunk proposes, to do all the things a merc in Night City who seeks fame, eddies, and glory would do. But it's also interactivity. The extent to which Night City is a space that provides the creativity to interact with it in a tangible way, where your actions are felt within the world, where there's a fantasy beyond the structured finitism of a fixed campaign or collection of scripted side missions. In simpler terms, it's having a world where you can do cool cyberpunk shit in a city that's affected by your choices. Over the course of Cyberpunk's life, when people criticize Night City, it's often contextualized through this lens. After all, this city was initially proposed as a sandbox, among other things. But, more importantly, it's what it's still trying to be today. Night City's shortcomings become transparently visible in two key areas. One, the absence of tangible consequences within the world. And two, the lack of any decent post-game in Cyberpunk. In Insomniac's Spider-Man, when you beat the game, you still have New York as your sandbox to live in the Spider-Man fantasy. In GTA 5, Los Santos is the most dynamically interactive open world that has graced this big blue planet, and Cyberpunk doesn't have a post-game per se. When you beat the game, you load back to a save file before the final mission, but the point still stands. So where does Night City sit as a sandbox? Let's start with the parts that work. When it comes to player immersion and a lively world to get lost in, whether it be crime scenes, preaching weirdos, random fights that break out between warring factions, waves of scavengers that jump you at random, homeless people begging for change, or random shakedowns and muggings that take place in alleyways. Small-scale dynamic interactions are minor, but build tangibility in the believability of this city and the bleak hellhole that it is. But as for the actual fantasy itself, the proclaimed cool cyberpunk shit I alluded to, well, there's a vast array of cool cars you can buy that all feel different to drive, ranging from supercars to motorcycles to armored vehicles armed with guns and missiles. There's 4 different apartments you can rent across the city that scale in price and size. There's cyberware, that's cool, but it's not cosmetic, so we'll get to that later. And there's guns, lots of guns, but we'll also get to that later. In Night City, earning eddies is the name of the game. and having a collection of cool shit to spend them on is vital to the fantasy. And there isn't much else here in terms of cool shit to buy, but it's enough to affect your decisions throughout a playthrough. I was constantly torn between spending eddies on cyberware, weapon upgrades, and buying the cool ass supercars and high-rise apartments that I wanted, purely to reap the benefits of V's rise in reputation. The game's economy is well balanced, making things expensive enough to warrant those choices meaningful, but not so expensive to where you can't get everything you wanted within a reasonable grind. But the real heart of this fantasy, where those eddies actually come from, lies with gigs, mercenary work that's presented as side content. And while there are an absolute metric fuck ton of them to do, they're also finite and repetitive. I'll share more thoughts about gigs later, but besides that, what's left to actually do in Night City boils down to street races, one repeatable gig type in Phantom Liberty that's really just driving, renting hookers, and the wanted system. The wanted system is pretty good, basically GTA 5 but with some Cyberpunk sauce thrown into the mix. Whenever you feel the urge to mow down civilians, the NCPD will hunt you down with ramping intensity. There's a solid buildup in difficulty the more stars you accumulate. If you're driving a car that can change colors, you can do it on the fly and throw off your pursuers, which is a small but unique mechanic that I like. And at 5 stars, max tac, the NCPD's elite task force arrives in a big scary dropship and will proceed to curb stomp your pasty ass into oblivion if you're not careful. There's a good ramp up in intensity that's mechanically rewarding, where a 5-star wanted level feels dangerous. But this system isn't perfect, because it's placed in a game that doesn't have the infrastructure to capitalize on it. It becomes obvious that even pre-revamp, this system was an afterthought because of how often you actually engage with it. The only crimes you can commit that the police will actually notice are hit and runs, car theft, and open murder. And the cops certainly don't care about your crimes if it's a gig or quest you're doing. Oh, wait guys. Looks like he's doing a side quest. Yeah, he's probably gonna commit a much different, more serious crime than the one we're chasing him for, but you're free to go. Have a nice day. All in all, Night City has a decent amount of stuff that you can immerse yourself in. But also, not really. Cyberpunk's postgame boils down to driving, sitting in your apartment, approaching hookers, and shooting cops. That's it. The factions that supposedly control each district are non-existent outside of side content, and when it comes to a world that's reactive to your choices, there are approximately 0 decisions in the game that have any lasting effects on the city. In Night City, where are the futuristic casinos, the back alley gambling rings, the gang hideouts, the corrupt police that you can bribe, the garage below your apartment to display your collection of supercars? Why don't your choices and actions in gigs affect your standing with fixers? Why does siding with any particular faction in missions have no tangible effect on how you interact with them in the city? Why can't the fighting ring side quests have repeatable fights? Why can't you go back to that weird sensual strip club in that one mission? Where is the fucking drip? Seriously, I've never seen a game with such a cool aesthetic have such a baffling array of clothing to equip. All I have to drip V out in are variations of the same weird tuxedo, some dresses, and clown clothing. What is this shit? As for vehicle customization, you can change the colors of some vehicles, but only some. And it's no Los Santos customs. Night City is alive, breathtaking, but it doesn't live up to its potential. And I know, comparison's the thief of joy and all, but you can't tell me that there aren't leaps and bounds of potential for Night City to transform into something that Los Santos can't even compare to. That there isn't a foundation for a highly replayable sandbox that is barely realized. That the framework for reactive layers of choice and consequence within this city is here, but it isn't even trying. I'm just saying that as a sandbox to get lost in the cyberpunk fantasy, the collection of what's here makes for a city that feels a mile wide and a foot deep. The truth is, whichever way you look at it, Cyberpunk gave up on that original vision a long time ago. And as a result, Night City is a damn immersive open world. And when you look beyond the shadow of everything that was promised, Night City will go down as one of the most iconic locations in gaming. And yes, I fucking mean that. Cyberpunk is, for better or for worse, considered an RPG. It has a character creator, dialogue choices, and diverging skill trees that lock you into different playstyles. But is it a good one? I've already said that this game is forever torn between 2 identities, the sandbox choice-driven RPG and an open-world action game. And it's really good at being one of those, and not so much the other. But when it comes to Cyberpunk's gameplay, it's the exception. Combat, stealth, environments, and build crafting that results in dramatically different playthroughs, at least when it comes to gameplay. It starts with your character creator, and it's only worth mentioning because it's a pretty good character creator. You can change every conceivable feature of the human body, from cheekbones to eyebrows to, of course, at last, the long-awaited next-gen sequel to Penis 1. The only choice here that actually affects your playthrough would be choosing male or female V for two different but equally memorable voice performances, along with your first 9 attribute points that play into this game's main forms of progression. Cyberpunk's perk trees were a major pain point of its 1.0 version, and today. There are varied opinions, but mine is that they're impeccable. Each time you level up, you gain 1 attribute and 1 perk point. Attributes are your stats that grant access to the perks that make up each skill tree, and the builds that can be made here become one of Cyberpunk's most defining strengths. Each branch of this tree is a separate corner of the Cyberpunk fantasy that you just can't find anywhere else. Build your V into a cyber samurai who can deflect bullets and dart around the map like a ninja, a defensive tank who slams enemies on the ground with a sledgehammer, an edge runner who pushes their cyberware to its limits, or a net runner who uses quick hacks to wipe waves of enemies off the map with your mind. Each perk tree unlocks entirely new, unique abilities and mechanics that alters the flow of combat on a fundamental level. By the time you reach level 60, you'll have more than enough points to fully invest into multiple trees and combine playstyles to truly make it your own. For my main playthrough, I of course channeled my inner Warframe and made my V into a cyber samurai that's proficient with tech weapons, and I had a lot of fun doing it. I had virtually no stealth tools, so staying quiet was difficult, but for my second playthrough, I built V into a stealth-focused netrunner, quick hacking enemies from a distance while using throwing weapons to kill without making a sound. It's a level of variance that single-handedly warrants multiple playthroughs. While your perks can be respec'd as often as you like, the attributes that lock you into those perk trees can only be respec'd once, and as an open world action game, this prohibits your ability to experiment and engage with different playstyles in a single playthrough, which I do think is much more a negative than a positive when you consider there isn't much else to make a second playthrough different. We'll get to that later. But aside from leveling, what's by far the most impactful system in terms of raw damage and survivability is cyberware. Where skill trees determine your playstyle, cyberware scales its power. It's the most complex system in the game that's admittedly intimidating at first, but is complementary to your perks. Different parts upgrade different aspects of V, like optics, which modifies your scanner, skeletal implants scale damage reduction, and certain cyberware can even add completely new abilities, like a double jump, additional weapons built into your arms, or swapping your ability to quick hack for a melee berserker frenzy that makes you unstoppable for a short duration. Different implants breed direct synergies with your perks, like equipping optics that highlights enemies through walls with tech weapons, hand implants that enable smart weapon targeting, or cyberdecks that provide the net running buffs that you are looking for. And if there's one part of this system that doesn't work, it's the cyberware weapons. Because they are so fucking cool, and all of them are straight fucking garbage, and are worse than normal weapons in every way. Even after Phantom Liberty tried to fix this, it didn't do nearly enough. But overall, cyberware and your perk trees are two parts of a whole, that whole being good build crafting, and by extension, good progression. But what do you get when good progression is without fun mechanics at the core of it all? Well, the answer is Star Wars Outlaws, because Cyberpunk has fun mechanics. Gunplay is solid and varied, weapon types have unique characteristics that make them mechanically distinct. Power weapons ricochet bullets off surfaces, tech weapons penetrate walls, and smart guns remove the need to aim entirely. Melee is equally sound, with katanas in particular feeling crisp and decisive, and the sound of slicing goons into tiny pieces is strangely pleasant. When it comes to guns blazing combat, Cyberpunk doesn't disappoint, and when it comes to the alternative, stealth doesn't either. What separates stealth in Cyberpunk from being plagued by the same bundle of issues that stealth in most open world games usually have is its commitment to authenticity. Whether it's enemies with a universal case of tunnel vision, enemies that only walk in the same straight line even if it's over their co-worker's dead corpse, at which they failed to even bat an eye at. When you can't suspend your disbelief, when AI is so brain dead it feels like a video game. Well, it feels like a video game, an easy one, and you're not immersed or mechanically engaged. It's simple, but enemies in Cyberpunk do have peripheral vision. Patrol paths are complex, and if you don't find a place to stash the bodies of your victims, they will find them and know you're there. This isn't Arkham. You're not a predator patrolling his hunting ground. You're a mercenary that has to rise to the occasion, and there's a dedicated plausibility in making the playing field feel even. Information and planning phases of stealth are complemented by your scanner, which lets you disable cameras, mark enemies, and effectively survey the landscape. When your presence becomes known, enemy netrunners can track your location. Cameras have to be hacked, not destroyed. Internal logic is respected, and it results in having no disbelief to suspend at the end of it. If you're running a stealth build, you do become much harder to spot, but in a world where everyone has cyberware, it's not a stretch to imagine an explanation for that. And when it comes to the execution phase, it's tense, because stealth in Cyberpunk has stakes. It's difficult enough to require careful planning, and if you fuck it up, there's no going back. It's open combat, or death, and it's the only real instance of consequence in the entire game. Except it's also not, and everything I just said is wrong. Because there was never any real incentive to engage with stealth over open combat. You have the option to kill or incapacitate with every stealth takedown, but aside from like one instance with some random monk on a side quest, it really doesn't matter whether you murder everyone or not. Story missions don't ever turn out any differently whether enemies spot you or not, even when it really feels like it should. Stealth is theoretically tense, but you end up not giving a fuck because it doesn't matter. And guns blazing combat is almost always the quicker and easier way to go about it. However, one thing that both stealth and combat succeed symbiotically with is the game's arena design. Night City may not be the sandbox you hoped for, but combat environments are. There was a mission with Takemura late in the game's second act where you scout out an Arasaka compound and have to infiltrate it quietly. At least that's what Goro recommends, you really don't have to. But in this mission, there are at least 6 different ways into the compound and multiple more into the warehouse, and how you go about reaching your objective is entirely up to you and the dozens of factors at play. You could disable the cameras, distract the guards, and enter through the front, or take out the guards on the right and use the side entrance. Take a service tunnel underneath the base and avoid enemies entirely, or hijack an approaching van and use it to get through the gate. If you've chosen the corporal life path, you can actually just walk in like you own the place and use your Arasaka knowledge to talk your way through the door. And if all else fails, or if stealth isn't your cup of tea, well, just shoot your way through. Your build weighs heavily in how easy each of these options are. There are complex obstacles to overcome and a multitude of different ways things can turn out, which makes for a dynamic sandbox of gameplay scenarios that are determined entirely by you. There is a true sense of freedom here, and this extends to most other missions in the game, to admittedly varying levels of success. From gigs to side quests to the main campaign, you always have the choice to go stealth or guns blazing. The stats that you've chosen open different pathways within environments, and even when stealth is a preferred mission parameter. If you get caught, you don't fail, you just have to adapt, which has its issues, but forced stealth is far from the answer. The sum of these parts, that being combat, stealth, and its environments, makes for a fun core gameplay loop that does have RPG elements. Light ones, but they're here nonetheless. And there's just one problem with all of it. This game is too fucking easy. I'm gonna show you the exact moment that I realized I couldn't die in this game.
We're under fire!
This footage is in hard mode, the third highest of 4 difficulty levels that promises a substantial challenge in its description, and in it, I am fighting MaxTac, the elite squad of 5 deadly mini-bosses that are designed to be an overwhelming threat, along with squads of police officers to back them up. And I couldn't die. Shortly after this, I bumped the difficulty up to the highest in the game and saw the exact same result. It's entirely possible that my build is just that good, and this can be considered an outlier of scenarios. But that's blasphemy, I'm a fucking idiot. Do you really think I went through every single piece of cyberware and fine-tuned the best possible combinations for the most optimized build? Fuck no, this game's just not balanced. I will say the difficulty level feels just right for the first 2/3 of the game, but once you hit around levels 40 or 50 and have put together a decent build with upgraded cyberware, you're unstoppable. You'll have enough attribute points to max 3.5 of the 5 skill trees. Cyberware in combination with body perks makes you literally unkillable with any playstyle, and while this game is still incredibly fun to play, the tension is lost, while stealth still maintains its level of difficulty. When combat is this easy, what incentive is there to even bother? But okay, that just about covers all the gameplay focused elements. Oh wait, that's right, I forgot. Vehicle combat exists. I'm kidding, I didn't forget. It's written in the script, just like this sentence is. Vehicle combat in Cyberpunk just feels like an afterthought. Because, well, that's exactly what it is. Much like the wanted system, it was tacked onto a game that was built without it in mind. Every instance of vehicle combat in any content pre-Phantom Liberty is an on-rails scripted sequence. And they aren't bad. They're just an obvious disconnect to having this system here today and it not being used in the game at all. but I do enjoy its inclusion. It makes the open world more interesting. There are a few perks that unlock some fun vehicle-focused abilities, and overall, it's a net positive to have. A net positive is what the majority of Cyberpunk's gameplay can be described as. Its mechanics are fun, game feel is important, and here, it's good. Are they enough to qualify this game as an RPG? Well, not entirely. The role you play is fixed outside of combat, and the truth is, this game plays more like a damn good action game with stats than an RPG. And if not for its perk trees, this wouldn't even be a discussion worth having. But let's look elsewhere, to the content by which Cyberpunk's gameplay is presented, which takes us to the real meat and potatoes of this game. There's a quest in Cyberpunk that starts out as a simple job. You meet with a guy who wants you to kill someone for him. That's someone being the person who killed a loved one of his. So you tail your target with your client who insisted on coming along until the opportunity to strike arises. Your client, in a fit of rage, approaches the vehicle, armed and ready, but is quickly and suddenly pumped full of lead by the officer. The convict, your target, steps out of the vehicle, and you're faced with a choice. Take out the officer, kill your target, and complete your contract. Simply walk away from this tense situation, or hear him out. The convict, Joshua Stevenson, who's on death row for countless cold-blooded murders, invites you to join him. You don't know for what. You don't know why. You have no rhyme or reason to listen to him and get in that vehicle other than sheer curiosity. If you choose anything other than the latter, the questline ends there. But if you choose to go with him, you begin a multi-stage storyline about forgiveness, spirituality, corporate exploitation, morality, and redemption. Joshua Stevenson is a man facing death, but seeking forgiveness. He's had his come-to-Jesus moment and has become quite the fanatic. And Rachel, an executive of a corporate brain dance studio, is putting this nutjob on camera to be crucified in front of the world. On one hand, Joshua Stevenson is hardly a man who deserves a happy ending, but on the other, he's a mentally ill victim being exploited by a soulless corporation. And on the other hand, is Joshua even deserving of forgiveness? How much of this newfound fanaticism was coerced by Rachel, and how much of it is a genuine reach for redemption? These are the questions you find yourself asking throughout, and by the time you nail him to his cross in a grossly commercialized execution, you don't know what to think. This is an example of a good side quest in Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk's side content is at times hard to classify as side content, because it ends up being over 80% of the game. Seriously, the campaign is short, clocking in at 54 missions including Phantom Liberty, which is less than 20% of the over 300 plus total number of missions and gigs in the game. Now that is a lot of game, and in Cyberpunk's case, with quantity, comes the unfortunate side effect of inconsistency. Let's start with gigs. Gigs are simple, and I don't have much to criticize. They're at the core of what a merc in Night City does, and it's essential to the fantasy and the game's economy. The majority of gigs boil down to the same formula. Go to a place, kill everyone, and leave. Sometimes you have to steal a thing, so stealth is an option. Sometimes you have to kill a guy or rescue another, but potato, the gameplay loop is effectively the same with the exception of a few notable outliers, which does make them repetitive. But I actually like gigs. There's both a strong extrinsic and intrinsic drive to do them, between the grind for eddies and street cred, and how the game's excellent combat is leveraged in short spurts. Between the game's rich economy and the non-linear nature of combat, you find yourself sufficiently incentivized and mechanically engaged, which makes them enjoyable at best and rewarding at worst. Gigs feel less like a repetitive chore and more like what they're supposed to. Mercenary work that you need to do to make a living in Night City. But side quests are the far more conflicting experience. They vary from enjoyable gags to uninteresting detours to genuinely compelling shit. Fun distractions like finding a talking smart gun, some guy with a dick implant that malfunctions, and stumbling onto a sentient vending machine that gives life advice to strangers are encounters that are hard to dislike. They take the over-the-top absurdities that this world exhibits and revels in their comical nature. Oh, shit! But on the other hand, there's a fair number of quests that simply fail to be interesting, like tracking down 7 runaway AI taxis that ultimately rewards you with a car you'll never use, scanning tarot cards around the city because astrology or some shit, or just watching a trailer for Cyberpunk Edgerunners, which I'll actually give a pass because that show absolutely slaps. You should go watch it right now if you haven't. There are dozens of quests that I simply don't care for. Quests that feel like padding with undercooked storylines and characters that you just don't have time to care about. And the end result is burnout. I found myself disappointed every time a quest marker led me to this monk, annoyed with every runaway taxi, dumbfounded as to why a side quest designed to feel like a chance encounter is delivered so artificially, and underwhelmed with how cobbled together Judy's side quest with Lizzie's feels compared to the rest of the romanceable characters. But for every quest that makes you want to stop playing, there's another that does the opposite. The content that plays into this game's strengths with unique gameplay encounters and compelling side stories that deepens the player's connection to Night City and the people within it. Let's start with Cyber Psychos. I'm a big fan. There are 17 unique boss fights scattered around the city, and each of them present a mechanically distinct encounter. I haven't talked much about boss fights, mainly because the majority of them in the campaign are very underwhelming, with the exception of Atom Smasher. But Cyber Psychos are far from it. One guy's in a mech suit, one has too many turrets around his house, another can turn invisible, forcing your attention to the water you're fighting him in. Each Psycho brings new mechanics to their fight, and each has a unique backstory to uncover that engrosses you in the lore of cyberpsychosis, and it's fascinating to unravel. At the end of the day, I'd take tracking down one of these guys over one of Delamain's malfunctioning taxis any day. I've already talked about how good a questline Sinnerman is, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. When Cyberpunk takes its time to immerse you into a storyline, form attachments to characters through exposure and well-written dialogue in a story that deepens the world around you, this game is at its best. Whether you're uncovering corruption within the NCPD with Detective River Ward, tracking down a serial killer, or unraveling a political conspiracy, or even just chatting with your neighbor Barry, whose depression ultimately drives him to suicide, in a tragic reminder of Night City's cruel nature. There are good side quests in Cyberpunk, and even when they fail to be non-linear with varying outcomes determined by choice, they succeed in being meaningful, entertaining, and in 2 isolated cases, impactful to the main story. Panem's questline with her nomad tribe has you earn her and the Aldecado's trust, helping the clan say goodbye to Scorpion, steal a cool tank, have sex with Panem, test drive the tank, and ultimately become a valued member of the Aldecado's clan, becoming part of a family. And it's the only quest in the game that actually unlocks a new ending. But much like this quest, late in Act 3, Johnny's storyline with Rogue is crucial to earning a high enough affinity for his ending path. But overall, side content in Cyberpunk is a mixed bag, and with how much of the game's playtime is occupied by it, the good is often diluted by the mediocre. And while only a handful of side content actually affects the main story in even small ways, this is a point that bleeds into the central conflict that this game has with itself, the proverbial elephant that's been in this room since 2020, and Cyberpunk's greatest failure: choice.
Night City legend.
Sounds good, but what does it really mean? What did I achieve shouting chipping in to a bunch of angry, pimply kids?
You gave those kids hope, but the suits couldn't buy everything.
I remember what I thought on stage, that even if they all died for their ideals, it'd be worth it. But when I look at you, listen, I realize I fucked up a lot of things. Either let down or used every last person who gave me their trust. Blind, selfish bastard that I was. But I've managed one thing for now. Not to fuck this up, what we have.
It's been a long, bumpy road, but we made it.
Most people I thought were my friends. They couldn't even stand to be in the same room with me. You're fucking closest to me by a long shot. There, 24/7. And yet, you don't seem to hate my living guts.
Cyberpunk is truly at its best when the game is at its slowest. In those quiet moments where V meets with Goro at a diner, grabs drinks with Panem after a job, or listens to Johnny reminisce about his samurai days. Those moments where you're just talking, bonding with characters, gauging how much you can trust someone, or navigating interpersonal dynamics. Cyberpunk in its presentation is excellent. Its perspective feels grounded and personal, and its writing is so good that the best parts of the game become its characters. At its core, Cyberpunk is a story about legacy, and the struggle between ambition and humanity. The idea that you live only as long as the last person to remember your name. In Night City, that's everything. And here, legends are immortal. So what will you sacrifice to become one?
Quiet life or blaze of glory?
Act 1 very much embodies the optimistic outlook of that ambition, what's often the view from the very bottom, where Jackie Wells encapsulates the fluorescence of hope that has yet to meet the boot of Night City's reality. Jackie Wells is funny, likable, your best friend. For the few hours you spend with him, he wins you over almost immediately. It's both a testament to Jason Hightower's brilliant performance as well as CDPR's exceptional character work, because depending on which life path you choose, you've either known Jackie your whole life or only met him moments ago. But either way, when your new life begins, Night City pulls you both into its glowing promise. And not long after, an opportunity presents itself. Dexter Deshawn, one of Night City's top fixers, comes to you with a job that could put your name on the map. And all you have to do is steal an extremely valuable item from the prince of the most powerful and corrupt international corporation in the world. What could go wrong? This isn't a formal overview of Act 1's plot, but throughout it all, Jackie Wells is the glue that holds it together. Through his charm, the sense of companionship you establish, he's your ride or die, the light in this dark, grim world. And eventually, that light is snuffed out. Night City kicks you right back down to the bottom, where a new force of utter chaos, the antithesis of everything that Jackie represents, a living, breathing, cybernetically invasive Night City legend, enters the scene.
Fuck.
Johnny fucking Silverhand. Or Act 1 is hope, the optimistic pursuit of the American dream. Act 2 is its pessimistic reality. Just when you think you've hit your lowest, right after losing your best friend and being handed a death sentence, the chip that saved your life is now killing you, and it comes with a nasty bug in its system. Johnny Silverhand is a force of spite, an egotistical terrorist solely driven by his crusade to tear down Arasaka by any means necessary. And when you first meet him, you despise everything he stands for. He's a cancer invading your mind, wanting more than anything to snuff you out and take control. He's everything you've ever wanted to be, a Night City legend staring you back in the face. And yet, he's as every bit as corrupt, vile, and inhumane as the animals that kill in the street or the corporations that tower above.
Go fuck yourself, Dick White.
This is the dream that Jackie died for? But the more Johnny invades your life, the longer you're stuck with him as your minds begin to blend, and the more you start to understand him. Through conversation, exposure, Keanu Reeves' undisputed charisma, and Johnny's choice to work with V rather than against him. Eventually, a friendship starts to blossom. You start to understand his motives, the humanity that he once had, and what led him to throw it away. And he also starts to understand you. Johnny eventually earns your trust, and you earn his. Whether it's the relic blending your personalities or the bond you've built, by the end, the time you spend together leaves you both changed for the better. Characters. That's the point I want to drive home. It's Cyberpunk's characters, how real every conversation feels, how fleshed out their motives are. Johnny and V's development is exceptionally written, a friendship that feels so naturally evolving, so tangibly plausible, so seamless you hardly notice how far you've both come, how much you've both changed, until you take a step back and realize it. Whether it's Judy, Evelyn, Panem, or Rogue, Cyberpunk's characters make Night City feel alive. Conversations spanning minutes at a time manage to not just hold your attention, but completely captivate it. You spend so much of this game cycling through dialogue options, and it's through this dialogue and the excellent writing to complement it where the player is immersed, and also stripped of their agency. Didn't see that coming, did ya? Ironic, isn't it? When faced with a ticking clock on life and a blank slate to determine what to do with it, you can't decide what you're willing to sacrifice. You can't choose what actions you take to shape your fate or the fallout that might surround it. You can't dictate how strong your bond becomes with characters or decide how much of your humanity to sell for the chance to live and how much of it to burn and die a legend. At least, not before it's too late. You're ultimately given a fixed path to pursue an ending that hardly considers the journey you take to it, and despite the fact that it is absolutely a damn compelling journey, the irony lies in the illusion this game presents. Story, choice, and consequence are three things that encapsulate both Cyberpunk's greatest success and its biggest failure, and the pull between a linear action game and a choice-driven RPG is never so exaggerated than when examining this game's campaign. Cyberpunk puts its best foot forward when it comes to having elements of real, genuine choice in its first act, and it starts with life paths. Life paths are your backstory. You can choose the Nomad, a lone ranger who abandons their clan to ride the wasteland, seeking a fresh start. The Corpo, a small cog in the machine that is international conglomerate Arasaka, where after a lifetime of climbing the corporate ladder by any means necessary, the cycle of corruption, exploitation, and white-collar disparity eventually drops the axe on you too. Or there's Street Kid. Born and raised on the streets of Night City, you know poverty and desperation like the back of your hand. But the beacon that is Night City radiates hope around you nonetheless. 3 different backstories with 3 different perspectives on key thematic elements of the world that introduce you to the game in 3 different opening missions. And none of it fucking matters. Let's try this again. Cyberpunk puts its best foot forward when it comes to having elements of real, genuine choice in its first act. And it starts with life paths, and it immediately stumbles. All 3 life paths converge on the same place merely 15 minutes into the game. All 3 life paths cease to distinguish a playthrough from that point on, with a laughable exception of the occasional dialogue option that never amounts to anything significant. The disappointment doesn't lie in how life paths diminish the experience, but with how they present an expectation that is just not fulfilled, because a Nomad doesn't interact any differently with the Aldecados. A Corpo isn't any less apprehensive of Johnny, nor a Street Kid any less antagonistic towards Arasaka. Wouldn't Johnny Silverhand have a much different impression of a V who used to work for the corp that killed him than say a Street Kid or Nomad? Wouldn't Takemura have anything different to say to a former employee of Arasaka? Why are each of the life path exclusive quests all laughably shallow and fail to last longer than 10 minutes? Why can the number of meaningful decisions exclusive to a life path be counted on one hand? It would be fair to expect each life path to offer a unique perspective, to open decision routes that impact both gameplay and story-related outcomes. That's what's proposed after all. But it doesn't, and they are just one example of this game's concepts exuding promise but failing in execution. But for now, say what you want about this game's lack of meaningful choice, because there is an exception. There's one mission that single-handedly warrants all of this criticism, because it is everything this game was promised to be. And it's the first and last instance of that vision. The Pickup. One of the first quests available after the prologue, you have to facilitate the buy of a flathead device that you need for the Konpeki Plaza heist. And how you go about it is entirely up to you. Right off the bat, you're given the option to meet with an interested party before the buy. Meredith Stout, Militech representative who has a problem that needs solving, and you might just be her solution. Stout offers to pay for the flathead herself, providing a chip that, unbeknownst to you, has a hidden virus downloaded onto it which will sabotage the Maelstrom's operations if they take it. From here, you could take the chip, hand it over to Maelstrom during the buy and align with Militech's goals, but you could just as easily hack the chip and strip it of its virus, pay with your own eddies instead, warn the Maelstrom before the handoff, or just start blasting at any point throughout the buy and take the flathead by force. If you hand off the infected chip or decide to shoot your way out, Militech gets what they want. But there's more to Meredith's operation than she's letting on. If you're a Corpo, you have the ability to sniff out the virus hidden on the chip. If you're a Nomad, you'll know that she's looking for a mole and can offer help in finding it. The power lies in not just your choices, but your actions as well, that culminates in dynamic outcomes determined entirely by you. If you end up siding with Militech in any number of applicable ways, you'll shoot your way through the remaining Maelstrom, and Stout will be pleased enough with your efforts to make time for some fun later on. But side with Maelstrom and you'll have to shoot your way through Militech's forces instead, where you'll be greeted with a new face on the other side, feeding Meredith to the wolves as she's disposed of off-screen. Not only do your dialogue choices matter, your actions hold equal weight. How many eddies you've collected beforehand is considered, and your life path actually uses your chosen background to open meaningful decision paths. And with all else equal, you could just choose to ignore Meredith entirely, go straight to the buy and end up walking out with the flathead without firing a single shot. Criticizing Cyberpunk's lack of choice doesn't come out of nowhere. The game gives you in its opening hour exactly what was promised. Branching narrative paths, non-linear quest design, outcomes determined by both your choices and actions with compounding layers of cause and effect that gives the player agency. And when the pickup ends, you converge on a path that never even attempts to match it. Mass Effect 2, much like Cyberpunk, is a game about its characters. Close your eyes and pick any game in the series, except you, and you'll get a game defined by its branching narrative, packed with layered choices and consequences that render them all meaningful. But Mass Effect 2 in particular, far more than its counterparts, puts an emphasis on those characters. Its plot chases a large-scale mystery that deals in galactic consequences, but its story is the characters you meet along the way. assembling each member of your crew, getting to know them, understand them. Completing every loyalty mission is crucial for both character development and the game's overall narrative as you delve into the backstories and personal struggles of each squad mate. Throughout it all, the decisions you make affects your relationship with each of them, how much time you choose to spend with them, the traits you exhibit through your actions, the sides you take in both high-stakes conflicts and small interpersonal arguments. It's a character-driven narrative that culminates with Suicide Mission, where the level of trust and loyalty you've built with each member becomes the primary causality for the labyrinth of outcomes that decides who lives and who dies in the final mission. Cyberpunk is also a story about its characters, but despite having the fleshed out nuances of compelling character growth, despite giving you choices that would feasibly determine how its relationships and outcomes are shaped, most of the time, your actions, your choices, don't matter. Goro Takemura, next to Johnny, is the character you spend the most time with throughout the campaign. He's the former bodyguard of one Saburo Arasaka, the Emperor who's since been murdered by his own son. And Goro, now seeking revenge, needs your help to honor his duty and expose Yorinobu for the betrayer he is. Throughout Act 2, an alliance born out of circumstance slowly evolves into a friendship, whether you want it to or not. Throughout nearly every conversation, you have the chance to antagonize or empathize with Goro in conversation. You're consistently given the option to join him on setup missions or leave him to do it himself. During the parade mission, you fight a former friend of his, Oda, in a boss fight, and are left with the choice to honor Goro's wishes and spare his life, or execute him right then and there.
Sorry, Oda.
Oh!
Throughout the entirety of this campaign, Johnny could not be less trusting of him, but you're never given the chance to act on his opinions. Whether or not you spend the game antagonizing Goro, kill Oda in cold blood, or skip his optional setup missions, the end point is the same. You earn his respect either way. You're given choices that would plausibly affect this outcome, but beyond the immediate response he gives, it doesn't. And at the end of Act 2, when Arasaka attacks, the culmination of your time spent together is the choice to leave Takemura to die, or to go back and save him. This decision determines whether he's alive for the Arasaka ending path or not, but it doesn't affect the outcome of that ending itself. The journey, even at this point, is irrelevant. Your choices don't govern this narrative, and this game is trying its best to convince you otherwise. Imagine a game where you could just as easily fail to earn Takemura's trust, where leaving him to die is the final nail in the coffin, except he survives and complicates his ending path as your enemy instead of ally. Imagine this level of depth with each of the side characters that are left behind by this campaign in the back half of Act 2. When it comes to characters, Goro Takemura represents the antithesis of player choice, a pale imitation of agency. Despite how well written he is, despite the fact that you'll find it damn hard not to grow attached to his lovable pragmatism, the lack of agency you have over that bond creates a dissonance between your actions and the fixed outcome you find yourself with. And this extends beyond just Goro Takemura. By the end of Act 1, Dex betrays you regardless of whether you planned on screwing him over with Evelyn or not. In Act 2, sparing Woodman's life at the Doll Club only determines whether or not he appears in a side quest. When you have to choose between trusting the Voodoo Boys or Netwatch in Act 2, the outcomes of that choice betrays the nuance that was set up. Both sides have questionable allegiances. Throughout the mission, you have every reason to doubt Placide's intentions, and Netwatch all but confirms those suspicions, while also making you wonder, what game is he playing? In hindsight, both are using you as a pawn with the intent of throwing you under the bus, but the only difference that choice ends up making is having to fight some Voodoo Boys afterwards, and you never see either faction again. Beyond the pickup, these are the choices you're presented with, and their effect is marginal at best. Gameplay-driven consequences like one extra combat encounter isn't enough to alter a playthrough. There's no morality system to summarize the consequences of your actions, no character other than Johnny whose dynamic evolves based off your decisions. In Cyberpunk, you don't have choice, you have the illusion of it. Every path, every dialogue choice, every action you take converges on a predetermined outcome almost instantly. And that's the case for the majority of your journey, right up until the end. After tracking down Anders Hellman, confronting Hanako Arasaka, and exhausting every possible lead to try and unseal your fate, you've run out of time, and now you get to choose how your story ends. Cyberpunk's endings hold the strongest argument against what I've just spent almost 3,000 words explaining to you. Choice and consequence make its resurgence in this game's final hours. 3 paths laid before you, 3 different final missions with 6 different endings attached to them. If you've grown close with Johnny, completed his string of side quests with Rogue, and earned a high enough affinity, he'll offer to take the wheel and storm the Arasaka compound with Rogue by his side. Or, you could trust the word of Hanako Arasaka and make a deal with the devil, helping rid Arasaka of Yorinobu's reign, saving your life in the process, but risk selling your soul to the devil. But if you've completed Panem's quest chain and have become part of the Aldecaldos clan, you can call on your newfound family and storm the compound with friends by your side. 3 main roads are paved before you, and yet, to spare your loved ones and avoid trusting the enemy, you may still choose honorable suicide, rolling credits right then and there, or storm the compound alone, just you and Johnny in one final blaze of glory. In this moment, you're given the agency to govern your fate. 3 decision paths that leads to 6 different final endings. And that's something. That's choice. But does that exonerate the fact that in between the very first and the very last hour of this entire game, you aren't given a single meaningful choice? Does that exonerate the fact that 2 strings of side quests have infinitely more impact on the story than any of the campaign missions combined? If anyone remembers anything about Mass Effect 3, it's that ending, and the outrage that spawned from it. 3 games filled with branching narratives, gut-wrenching story-altering decisions, and a labyrinth of outcomes that created one of the most impressive, dynamically evolving stories in gaming that was determined by your choices. For that to culminate in 3 slightly different versions of the same ending, for Shepard's fate to be fixed no matter what you do, after hundreds of hours, for your journey to end barely considering the choices you've made beforehand. It was an outrage. When it comes to Cyberpunk, I find the exact opposite is true. The journey too is largely irrelevant, and yet, the endings present you with a choice that attempts to convince you otherwise. Endings are by far the most impactful aspect of a story. It's the impression you're left with, the thing you'll remember more than anything years later that could single-handedly turn years of success into a bitter taste that you try and forget. It was Mass Effect 3's undoing, and Cyberpunk's triumph. And yet, every ending is only as good as the journey to it. Mass Effect 3 stripped its players of their agency, and Cyberpunk finally delivered it. But in my eyes, that destination merely exposes how little your choices mattered beforehand. Johnny is the only character in the campaign whose relationship isn't fixed, and it makes his ending path the most narratively nuanced. Arasaka's lacks the personal connection to its stakeholders that could have been utilized through Goro, while Panem's feels completely detached from the central story and its themes. But luckily, everything converges once again on the game's final choice with Johnny, and from here, every possible ending resonates beautifully with the game's core themes. And so, I'll ask the question, as an RPG, does Cyberpunk succeed? Well, no. You still only ever have the illusion of choice, and in my eyes, it's not very convincing. But what if it doesn't matter? What if you look beyond the broken promises, let go of the baggage that's dragged this game down for years? What if you finally accept that Cyberpunk isn't an RPG, but an action game disguised as one? I could pick any mission in the campaign and easily prove how enthralling an action game Cyberpunk is. But the heist, above all, is the start of one of the most tense, thrilling, action-fueled, emotional roller coasters of game that I've played this decade. So let's relive the magic, shall we? After putting the pieces in place, the stage is set for the job of a lifetime, and the plan is solid. V and Jackie stroll into Konpeki Plaza as if they belong. The sleek golden red interior of the hotel echoes the contrast of a place you don't belong in. You're in the lion's den now, and there's no more margin for error. But the plan goes off without a hitch. The pair pass through hotel security, use the flathead to disable the building's defenses, allowing T-Bug to jack in, and V and Jackie make their way to Yorinobu's room. So far, it's been as simple and predictable as it gets. The part of the heist movie before the plan goes tits up, where a slow, conversational entrance ramps up meticulously as close calls are grazed by and victory becomes within reach. And hey, being simple and predictable isn't always a bad thing. Jackie Wells continues to bring heart and levity with every sentence. Your shared dream of becoming a legend is about to become a reality. You're unmistakably invested, and the walls are primed to close in around you. And when they do, you're left at the edge of your seat. set of circumstances that no one could have possibly predicted. V and Jackie are now witness to the murder of an emperor and have to get the fuck out of there before it's too late. A tension so palpable, stakes higher than Snoop Dogg narrating Animal Planet. The escape from Konpeki Plaza is nothing short of exhilarating, but this isn't a high. It's a downward spiral as the relic is damaged, Jackie is hit, and you're forced to store the relic inside your own head as you barely make it out alive. And just when you think you're in the clear, the final wall comes crashing down. A pit of anger, despair, and guilt washes over V, and you feel every second of it. Night Cities just showed you firsthand the price of immortality, and it has one final lesson for V.
Alright then. Can't risk it, V. Remember our first convo? Seems I've chosen the quiet life after all. No blaze of glory for me.
And that, my friends, is one cold-ass motherfucking title drop if I've ever seen one. And it doesn't end here.
Tonight, I'm here to say goodbye to all of you.
Turns out, V's not dead as you wake up in a junkyard where Dexter Deshawn is executed right in front of your eyes by Goro Takemura. As he races to get you to safety, you're pulled right back into the adrenaline-pumping action without a second to breathe. The driver of this sequence isn't the action, but the intrigue. You've just relived the death of Johnny Silverhand and woke up to find that you're not dead, and the Emperor's bodyguard is saving your life. At this point in the story, you don't know why Goro was helping you, and that question, along with the many others, burns at the back of your mind as you both fight tooth and nail for survival until you finally make it to Victor's, where the bad news is delivered, and Act 2 begins. That's the culmination of this game's first act. 90 concise minutes that I think perfectly encapsulates what this game does at its best. Emotional highs, devastating lows, adrenaline-fueled action with electric set pieces, and tension, stakes, characters, and story, firing at an all-time high. This is the mission that unmistakably hooked me, where I was all in on what this game was selling. And if you think that trend doesn't continue throughout the rest of the campaign, you're fucking crazy. No, it's not the RPG that was promised, and there's a tangible disappointment in that. The dichotomy of what is and what was promised runs to this game's very core, but it shouldn't take away from the excellence that's been in this game from the day it launched. From the start, Cyberpunk has always been a great action game, and that's a fact. And now, the only question left to answer is what next? Well, chooms, now we get to see what Cyberpunk can be when both halves of it are embraced, and where this game's redemption arc reached its conclusion.
We lost everything! We had to pay the price! Yeah, we lost everything! We had to pay the price!
A hallmark of redemption, a staggering slice of stylism, and Cyberpunk's final destination. Phantom Liberty is the expansion that put this game back on the map, the catalyst that shifted player perception and brought CDPR's reputation back to its former glory. And it's because of one simple reason. Phantom Liberty is really good. It's an extension of what already works, a new slice of game to sink your teeth into that refines the base game's flaws in the process. It blends enough of its own distinct flair to make it absolutely stand out, while still fitting into the game seamlessly. It's not a DLC, it's a must-play expansion that would be nothing short of a disservice to avoid. So let's dive in and find out why. From the start, this expansion weaves its way effortlessly into the campaign, as a cryptic message from Songbird quickly sweeps you into a questline you won't soon forget. Cyberpunk has rather impressively managed to blend multiple genres of film into its story, from classic heist to detective noir, gritty crime drama, and a dash of Mad Max. And this time, Phantom Liberty goes all in on political espionage. V quite literally becomes an agent of the US Secret Service and is thrown into the center of a conspiracy that you have to unravel in a tale of politics, espionage, betrayal, and above all, humanity. After sneaking your way through the barriers surrounding Dogtown, the president of the NUSA needs your help as her plane is shot out of the sky. Cyberpunk hasn't yet failed to deliver a climactic inciting incident, and Phantom Liberty is no exception. It wastes no time throwing you to the center of this conflict, where combat scenarios enthrall, scripted set pieces thrill, and story seeds are planted with compelling intrigue. As you escort Madam President to safety, she couldn't be a more likable presence. Strong-willed, determined, and compassionate, the kind of woman that seems perfectly qualified to run a country. And yet, she may be too qualified by a politician's standards, as Songbird points to the facade that you won't see fade until much later. But there's no time to dwell on Rosalind Myers, because shit goes sideways. Songbird loses control of the Chimera and goes dark, and as the danger intensifies, you still have to make it out alive. And you do. Or after a kinda mid-boss fight, some more sneaking and shooting, and officially becoming an agent of the FIA, Madam President is safe for now, and you have to set out on your mission to find Songbird before it's too late. It's here where Dogtown, Phantom Liberty's new region, comes into focus. Dogtown is different from anywhere else in Night City. It's run down, crumbling to pieces, and is defined by its military occupation. It's separated from the rest of Night City by towering colossal barriers, and coincidentally, is also isolated from the flaws that surround it. Kurt Hansen, suspect number one in the attempt on Madam President's life, has had a stranglehold on this region for years. Since his permanent occupancy, there hasn't been a better place in Night City to enter the black market. The NCPD have no presence here, but Kurt Hansen's militia most certainly do. You see their patrols around every corner, populated outposts, and routine inspections add a sense of realism that you won't find outside these walls with the NCPD. It's tangible evidence of the corruption and totalitarianism that runs rampant here. And as far as Dogtown goes as a map, it's by far one of the smallest regions in the game, but trades every square foot lost with added depth to the geography and the region as a whole. Verticality scales to heights that even Corporal Plaza doesn't reach. Makeshift settlements made of cobbled together cargo freights and crumbling ruins accentuate the black market economy that this region thrives on. Unlike the rest of the city, there are tangible layers to exploration, whether it be relic upgrades scattered around varying levels of altitude, faction hideouts that are presented as challenging combat encounters with a mountain of rewards at the end of each. Night City at times might feel a mile wide but a foot deep, but Dogtown is the opposite, and that trend continues with its side content. Mr. Hands, one of Night City's most elusive fixers, has his eyes set on Dogtown, and you can actually help him climb to the top of it. Firstly through gigs, which in Phantom Liberty have evolved from the base games into something much closer to its side content. The good half of it, I mean. Whether it be digging the NCPD's finest out of a bloody mess of their own creation, or tracking down some prototype tech. In these gigs, you're confronted with choices, outcomes, a healthy dose of combat encounters. Light story elements, moral dilemmas, and varied outcomes are imbued with the consistently good spurts of combat that we've come to know and love, and it serves as a welcome evolution to content that previously wasn't much more than some pretty fun but repetitive busy work. And while I don't consider the base game gigs bad, I can't deny that these 10 new ones in Dogtown are far more interesting than any of the roughly 90 plus available throughout the rest of the city, and the region's actual side quests follow suit for the most part. But what really separates this expansion's side content is how it plays into a larger narrative. You complete gigs not just for eddies, but to build your fixer's trust. Mr. Hands grows more impressed of your skills the more work you do for him, and depending on the choices you make, you can help him rise to the top of the political power struggle that Dogtown finds itself in, and it'll be entirely because of your actions. If you want to know what a world that reacts to your choices looks like, this is it. Dynamically building standing with your fixer opens doors for other opportunities, all while those same choices play into a larger narrative around you. That's what's missing in Night City, and it's a shame it's only found in Dogtown. But back to the story at hand. Agent V has to find Songbird, and will need some help to do it.
Don't turn. Eyes on the court.
Solomon Reed, Idris fucking Elba in the flesh. An FIA sleeper agent with a past that becomes the building block to this story's central conflict. Reed has been undercover in Dogtown for the past 7 years, where after a mission during the Unification War left him critically wounded, he took the fall for the NUSA's political misfire. He was thrown under the bus, fed to the wolves, sold out to Arasaka by his own government. And the one who pulled the trigger? Songbird herself. And yet, for 7 years, Reed never wavered, never hesitated. He stayed on mission as a sleeper agent in Dogtown, and when the time came, he answered the call without a fraction of doubt. The implications of Reed's backstory will come into focus soon, but right now, let's look at just how good this expansion's second act is. After touching base with Myers, you and Reed set out to find Songbird, and with the help of Dogtown sleeper agent number 2, Alex, and a shady netrunner who ends up getting fried by the Blackwall, we find out that she's being held captive by none other than Kurt Hansen. We've set the stage, teed up the politics that drive this narrative in the background, and established our central characters. So let's go play some Cyberpunk 0077. Shall we? Cool spy gadgets? Check. Covert infiltration? Check. High-stakes espionage crashing an upper-class social event? Check. Stealing the identities of shady criminals using a Mission Impossible special to assume their appearances? Double check. The inspiration for the events that unfold might be obvious, but fuck me if this James Bond screenplay doesn't perfectly blend itself with the world and setting of Cyberpunk and translate to stealth, combat, and dialogue that immerses as much as it engages to a ludicrous degree. Then I'm not a PNG of a color-swapped Red Hood from Arkham Knight. But what grounds this tale of national politics and government conspiracy are the stakes, and how character-driven they actually are. The crux of this expansion, the defining cataclysm that encompasses everything Phantom Liberty does so damn well, comes down to one choice, one betrayal. Songbird or Reed? Solomon Reed is a man bound by duty, shackled to it even. Despite being stabbed in the back and handed over to a hostile megacorp, some broken part of him clings to his ideals like a crutch. He can't separate what's right from what the FIA wants, but his humanity isn't gone. Far from it, in fact. He cares deeply about Songbird, Alex, even V, feels responsible for them. But when it comes down to it, if he's proven anything, it's that he'll always choose the mission. In this sense, Reed is his own kind of tragedy, and it's compelling to watch unravel. Seeing him justify everything the NUSA did to him, insisting it was the right thing to do, the only thing to do, and when that logic turns on Songbird, the question becomes, whose interests is he really aligned with? Songbird's or the FIA's? Reed tells himself, and you, when he gives you the means to neutralize Somi, that is for her own good, that he's trying to save her, and he truly does believe it. But it's also what Myers ordered him to do. So is this really about saving Songbird, or is he just following orders, blinded by his loyalty, taking the choice from Somi as the FIA has done to them both for years? And then there's Songbird, a woman out of time and out of options, a direct parallel to V. She's dying, the cost of years spent as the FIA's most valuable weapon. After tapping into the Blackwall one too many times on their behalf, it's eating her alive, and now that she's backed into a corner, she's down to her last option. Reed suspects that it was Songbird who was behind the hit on Myers, and he's right. Songbird betrayed her government and committed treason of the highest order. She made a deal with Kurt Hansen, which backfired spectacularly for her. But it wasn't out of spite or vengeance. She just wants to get out, to break free from the system that stripped her of her agency so long ago. Like V, she just wants to live. And so she turns to you, her last way out, with the promise of a cure for you both. At every stage, you want to believe her. Your goals align. She does everything she can with every chance she has to try and earn your trust, to prove she's genuine. But she doesn't tell you everything. And no matter how sincere she seems, you can't shake the feeling that there's something else she's hiding. And so you inevitably arrive at that choice. On one side, betray Songbird and trust Reed, a man who claims he wants to save her, who might even believe it. But if nothing else, has proven that his integrity only extends as far as his allegiance to the NUSA. And on the other, betray Reed, put your trust in Songbird, a woman on the run who betrayed the government that she swore allegiance to in a desperate bid to survive. A relatable tale if there ever was one, but is she really on your side? Or are you just her last shot at freedom? This is where this expansion hits its sweet spot. How it blends the politics, action, and espionage with damn compelling character work, all building to a choice that leaves you truly split to the core. I've said this expansion corrects many of the flaws found in the base game, and the biggest of those aforementioned flaws is the game's illusion of choice. But Phantom Liberty doesn't have a labyrinth of different endings. There isn't a maze of outcomes to navigate. The difference isn't how many choices you have, but instead with how meaningful that journey to them is, how effectively every dialogue option builds to each, and how polarizing, nuanced, and morally gray the right choice ends up being. Let's talk about that third act, because whichever choice you make, every ending to this expansion is an emotional gut punch, a cinematic roller coaster, and a road that still has a few surprises left on it. If you choose to join Songbird on her escape plan, you'll fight tooth and nail against Reed and the full force of the FIA to survive, only for Somei's final truth to shatter you to the core.
Neural Matrix V can only be used once.
There's only one cure. Only one can be saved. And when Reed catches up, you again have to make a choice that will haunt the rest of your playthrough. But if you choose to betray Songbird, she gives in to the Blackwall in a fit of rage, culminating in a confrontation that's straight out of a fucking horror movie, which ultimately leaves Somei hopeless, broken, and alone. And she begs you to end her suffering.
I tried on my own. Don't have the strength. Please. End it.
I do think that betraying Reed leads to the better third act, but either way, when you compare these choices to the base game's endings, they very much feel shallow by comparison. Takemura doesn't have a stake in the Arasaka ending path, despite being the sole voice of reason to take it. Panem's path is completely diverged from the campaign's central themes and characters, even if it's where what's considered the best possible ending can be found. It's detached from Johnny, from the narrative climax you've been building towards. And this might be a hot take, but I don't like this ending path very much. Only Johnny is given the time and nuance to present the player with a compelling, layered choice. And luckily, all three ending paths culminate on a choice that revolves around this relationship, but it once again serves to make that journey to it a straight fucking line. Phantom Liberty did what the rest of the game failed to. It made me feel like I had agency. It blends the game's strengths as an action game with choices that feel impactful, choices that affect the story's central relationships. Choosing Songbird or Reed makes the other your enemy, and that betrayal doesn't just change the final mission, but the entire third act. Consequences that revolve around this story's characters, even elements in the world surrounding you. Fuck, this expansion goes so far as to finally introduce a consequence to betraying the Voodoo Boys. If you end this expansion by handing Songbird alive over to Reed and the FIA, you'll unlock a new ending path for the base game, taking up Reed and the FIA on their promise of a cure, condemning Johnny to death, and sacrificing what humanity you have left to live a hollow, bleak existence. At the end of the day, Phantom Liberty is still an action game, but it imbues just enough meaning, nuance, and complexity to its choices to make the illusion convincing. Phantom Liberty stands apart not because of its detachment from the base game, but because of its unwavering consistency, its commitment to repairing what's broken, its authenticity in the genre it's realizing, and the heart it carries from start to finish. It's a damn good expansion that complements what's already excellent and spreads the message of this game's redemption like a megaphone in an auditorium. And as a lasting impression to leave with, I can't think of a higher note to end Cyberpunk's journey on. Redemption is a funny thing. When you look at this game as a whole, some of the best parts of it have been there from the very start. The truth is, CD Projekt Red never lost it. Night City was always a titan of open world design. Its campaign was always a masterclass in storytelling. And yet, the game wasn't ready in 2020. 7 years in the oven wasn't enough. Its gameplay systems were mediocre, its quest design was far from non-linear. It also didn't fucking work, and it was not, and still isn't, an RPG. At least not really. Whatever their reasons might be, whichever combination of compounding problems led to that launch, today, it doesn't matter. Because yes, they fixed it, but also because, for a game that's still wrestling with an identity crisis, it has the remarkable ability to enthrall you regardless. This video is framed through the lens of redemption for a reason, because despite Cyberpunk's launch, despite its still present flaws and its fractured identity, the game on its own merits is incredible, and that's why it's absolutely redeemed. Thank you for watching. CD Projekt Red are in fact making a Cyberpunk 2, and I'll tell you what, that game will have to decide whether to realize the RPG sandbox potential this game didn't, or to stay the course and make another kick-ass action game. And whichever they choose better be clear from the start. But anyways, remember kids, if there's one lesson that you can take away from Cyberpunk 2077, don't fucking pre-order.
So dead and